radical, isn't that the way it is? The last issue of our newspaper had headlines in big red ink, "Revolt!" Well, needless to say, that annoyed the authorities. They ordered me out of the Rhineland. We went to Paris. Where else can you go and sit all night in a cafe and tell people lies about how you were revolutionary in the old country? Yes, if you're going to be in exile, be one in Paris. Paris was our honeymoon. Jenny found a flat in the Latin Quarter. It was heavenly months. But the word was out, from the German police to the Paris police. It seems the police develop an internationalist consciousness long before the workers. So I was expelled from Paris too. We went to Belgium. Expelled again. We came to London, where religion refugees came from all over the world. Yes, the English are admirable in their tolerance and insufferable in their boasting about it. That's when we moved to that little flat in Soho, where Jenny would make hot soup and bake boiled potatoes. There was fresh bread from our baker friend down the street. We would all sit around the table and eat and talk about events of the day, the Irish struggle for freedom, the latest war, the stupidity of the country's leaders, political opposition confining itself to just pips and squeaks, the cowardly press. I suppose things are different nowadays, eh? When Jenny read my book, Das Kapital, yes, this one, she said, "Your book will put readers to sleep." I said, after thinking about it, well, maybe it is a little boring. Jenny would say, "There's no such thing as a little boring." She wanted me to describe my theory of surplus value so the ordinary workers could understand it. All you have to say is this, she would say. Your employer gives you the barest amount in wages, just enough for you to survive and work. But out of your labor, he makes far more than what he pays you. So he gets richer and richer while you stay poor. She and I agreed that the book Das Kapital showed how the capitalist system must, at a certain stage in history, come into being. And it will bring about a colossal growth of the productive forces, an unprecedented increase in the wealth of the entire world. And then how it must, by its own nature, distribute that wealth in such a way as to destroy the humanity of both labor and capitalist. And how it must, by its nature, create its own grave diggers and give way to a more human system. Jenny would say, "Are we reaching the people we need to reach?" One day she said to me, "You know why the censors have allowed your book to be published? Because they can't understand it. They assume no one else will either." Well, she was right. Let's say only 100 people in world history have ever really understood my theory of surplus value. But it's still true. Again, I read the reports of the United States Department of Labor, Department of Labor, where your workers are producing more and more goods and getting paid less and less in wages. This is the great model of world capitalism. The nation that has not only robbed its own people, but sucked in the wealth of the world. You know, there's one thing that bothers me, and one of the other reasons I wanted to come back was to clarify my thinking to the masses. I did describe religion as the opiate of the people, but no one has ever said or ever paid attention to the full passage. Now listen carefully. This is what I said. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature. The heart of a heartless world the soul of soulless conditions, and the opiate of the people. Well now, true, opiate is no solution, but it may be necessary sometimes to relieve pain. Oh, yeah, I know about pain. My backside's killing me. I can't help thinking about Jenny. I keep thinking about her, how she packed up all of our possessions, brought her two little girls, Jennichin and Laura, across the channel to London. There she gave birth 3 times in our miserable, cold flat on Dean Street. She nursed those little babies and tried to keep them warm. We saw them die one by one. Guido, he'd not even begun to walk. And Francesca, she was 1 year old. I had to borrow 3 pounds to pay for her coffin. Then there was Moosh. Moosh lived for 8 years, but something was wrong with him from the start. He had a large, handsome head, but the rest of him never grew. The night he died, we all slept on the floor around his body until the morning came. When Eleanor was born, we were fearful. But she was a tough little thing. It was good she had 2 other sisters. They had barely survived themselves. Jennichin was born in Paris. Paris is marvelous for lovers, but not for children. There's something about the air. Laura was born she was our second, in Brussels. No one should be born in Brussels. Eleanor was the youngest and the brightest. Imagine, if you will, a revolutionary at the age of 8. That's how old she was in 1863. Poland was in rebellion against Russia and Russian rule. She wrote a letter to Engels that said, "Those brave little fellows in Poland." When she was 9, she wrote a letter to America advising President Lincoln on how to win the war against the Confederates. I called Eleanor Tussie. She learned of the Irish rebellion against England from Mary Burns. Now, Mary Burns was Engels' lover. Mary's nickname was Lizzie. Lizzie was a mill girl, and she couldn't read. Engels spoke 9 languages, so you might think this would make it kind of hard for them to communicate, but they loved one another. Lizzie was very active in the Irish movement. Tussie and her would visit, and the 2 of them would sit on the floor and drink wine and sing Irish songs until they fell asleep. Then there was that terrible night in Soho, the night the English government hanged 2 young Irishmen right there in Soho with a drunken crowd cheering. Those genteel English with their afternoon tea and their public hangings. I understand you don't hang people anymore. You just gas them or inject them with poison or use electricity to burn them to death. Much more civilized. Yes, that night they hanged 2 Irishmen for wanting freedom from England. Eleanor wept and wept. Now in London we had no money, but we always had Sunday picnics. We would walk for an hour and a half into the countryside, Jenny and I and the children. We'd have fruit, bread, cheese, and beer. But we always did have Sunday picnics. The memories, I wish you could have known Jenny. What she did for me cannot be calculated. After dinner, we would clear the table and I would work. I worked sometimes until 3 or 4 in the morning. I'd have my books on one side of the table. She would be sitting on the other side of the table. She would be transcribing. My handwriting was impossible. She would rewrite every word of mine. Can you imagine a more heroic act? Jenny also accepted the fact that I couldn't simply get a job like other men. Well, yes, I did try once. I wrote a letter of inquiry to the railway for a position as clerk. They responded as follows. Dr. Marx, we are honored with your request for a position here. We have never had a doctor of philosophy working for us as a clerk. But the position requires a legible handwriting, so we must regretfully decline your offer. Jenny encouraged me to get off my behind and get involved in the cause of the London workers. She came with me when I was invited to address the meeting of the International Men's Association. It was the fall of 1864, yes. 2,000 people were packed into St. Martin's Hall. The workers of all countries must unite against foreign policies which are criminal, which play upon national prejudices, which squander in wars the people's blood and treasure. We must combine across national boundaries to vindicate the simple laws of morals and justice in international affairs. Workers of the world, unite! Jenny liked that. Well, I want to get back to why I'm here. I said I wanted to